Hey guys, my name is Natalie and welcome to my channel, A Light for Christ. Today we're going to be talking about times when we feel like we can't hear God's voice. So I feel like that's something we've all gone through, we've all experienced. And so we're going to be digging into 1 Samuel chapter 30. So again, just a little bit of an introduction. So I feel like we've all been in a situation where we've prayed to God or we asked for guidance and direction, and like what path to take. And you just feel like you just aren't being heard or God isn't answering. Right? Sometimes we can either move without God's directions and we can mess things up, or we're afraid to move, and so for fear of taking the wrong path, we just stay still and stay put and we don't move, right? Sometimes we want almost like a sign from heaven, right? We want God to come down and tell us exactly, take this path, don't do this, do this, but that's not the way it works, right? God's word is what is supposed to direct our steps, right? And he speaks to us through his word and through so many different ways that he chooses to do so. So, in 1 Samuel chapter 30, a little bit of backstory. So God has just rescued David and his army from fighting against the Israelites with the Philistines. So David has fled from Saul and he's living in the Philistine land in Ziklag. And he comes to fight with the Philistines against the Israelites. But the captains and the leaders of the army, they were like, no, he can't fight with us. They remembered the songs, right, that they used to sing. Saul has slain his thousands and David is tens of thousands. So they knew, and they could almost feel like David was going to turn against them in order to gain Saul's favor. And so God ends up rescuing him, right, because David did not need to fight against his own people. And so now they've been sent back by King Achish back to Ziklag. And apparently it was a 3-day journey from what we can tell here. So they've just arrived, and they arrived to find that their town of Ziklag is burned. It's burned and there's nobody there. So that's where we're going to pick up. I'm going to be reading the first 15 to 18 verses. But feel free afterwards to go back and to read the whole chapter or read even the chapter before for a little bit more context. So it says, again, it's 1 Samuel chapter 30. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negev and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David, and David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them? He answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall rescue them. So David set out, and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook Besor, where those who were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men. 200 stayed behind, who were too exhausted to cross the brook Besor. They found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David. And they gave him bread, and he ate. They gave him water to drink, and they gave him a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, to whom do you belong, and where are you from? He said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had made a raid against the Negev of the Cherethites, and against that which belongs to Judah, and against the Negev of Caleb. And we burned Ziklag with fire, and David said to him, will you take me down to this band? And he said, swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this band. And when he had taken him down, behold, they were spread abroad all over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil that they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. And David struck them down from twilight until the evening of the next day, and not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. So if we go back, right, so David and his men are tired. It's the third day. They've arrived here, so you can imagine they're tired, and they found their town burned with fire. So one of the things I try to do is to put myself in their shoes of whoever I'm reading about in the Bible, right? To think about what they're going through, consider it, and what would that have been like, right? So if you remember, it's the third day they're traveling, right, before they finally reach Ziklag. So it's 3 days. So imagine how you would feel after 3 days of just traveling, right? He's been rejected by the Philistines, and then he's traveled just to find that his hometown had been, or not his hometown, but where he was living was burned with fire. So again, imagine you're tired, you've just traveled 3 days, and you come to find a ghost town, essentially, right? Everything that you've known is burned down. Your family is gone, your kids are gone, everything is gone and destroyed, right? How would you feel? And so it says that the men, all they could do was weep. They wept until they had no more strength. And then they all turned against David. So David not only feels rejected, he feels alone, right? He feels betrayed, and now death is looming over him, right? So he said he's rejected. He was rejected by the Philistines. He's alone because his family isn't where he thought they would be. He's betrayed by the very men who he's been leading for all this whole time. And then now death is looming over him. So David finally turns to the only one who could save him from death, which is God. So David goes to God and just says, am I supposed to pursue this band, right? Are you going to give them into my hands? And the Lord says, go. So he doesn't know who did it, right? They just know somebody came and raided their land. And God doesn't tell him who did it. God just says, go and pursue them. And one thing I learned while studying about this is that there would have been a trail to follow, right? You got to think these are 600 men that just attacked them, right? Plus the women they took, the kids they took. And later on, if you keep reading in the chapter, David took some of the herds and the flocks, all of it that they had captured. So all these animals would have been with them as well. So after walking down the same path, a trail would have been made. So David would have had a trail to follow, but he didn't know who it was that he was following. He didn't know how many of them there were. He didn't know where they were headed to. He just had that trail, right? And God doesn't tell him, this is the battle plan, or he doesn't tell him, this is how many men there are, this is who they are. He has no idea, but he's going to pursue, knowing that God has put them or given them into his hand, right? And so then we get to the other side where now the discouragement comes, right? So he's made his mind up, right? He's going down to the brook to cross over, right? And 200 men suddenly are no longer have the strength to cross, right? So they may not have been, convincing the other men to turn back, but even them just staying. Imagine that's a third of his army. There were 600 men, 200 of them stayed behind. So imagine, what that would have been like, right? So 200 men stay behind, 400 men keep going though. David keeps pursuing and he keeps going even in the face of the discouragement, right? And then they get to this place where they find an Egyptian in the open country, and the men bring him to David. And when they bring him to David, they give him food and they give him water, right? This man, we find out, hasn't eaten or drunk anything in 3 days and 3 nights. So you can imagine, right, what that might have been like. And so then David just basically talks with him, asks him the same questions we would have asked somebody, right? Other than who do you belong to, right? But even which family do you belong to, right? Where are you from? All these things, right? And so David asks this man, right, to whom do you belong and where are you from? And so he tells him, right? He tells him who he is, that he's a young man, he's an Egyptian, he's a servant to an Amalekite. And then he tells him that his master left him 3 days ago when he got sick. But before that, they had raided Ziklag. They raided and they burned Ziklag. And so here was David's answer, right? He pursued where God had told him, even if he didn't know who it was he was pursuing, how many of them there were, a clear path, right? He still pursued. And so God was faithful in that once David took off, right, God provided this Egyptian who was going to give him the directions, right, of where to go. So he ends up leading him right to the Amalekites, and they're dancing and they're drinking, and so they're not ready for battle at all and to defend themselves. And so David ends up fighting them. But the key thing here for me was the fact of David doing the next right thing. Right, so David listened and he pursued. He kept going down that path that was there, right? And they saved the Egyptian, right? They give him food, they give him water. That was the next right thing. It was this man who needed food, who needed water, who had been abandoned, and they give that to him. And from there is the source that God uses to provide the answer of who it is, where they are, and the battle plan, right, of how to go. Not necessarily like the battle plan, but he was able to take them right exactly to where they were, to where he knew they would be, and they wouldn't be, necessarily ready for battle because they were going to be drinking and enjoying all that they had gotten. So another passage that I wanted, or just an encouragement that I wanted to give, is to just find the next right thing. So maybe you reached a path, right, where you're in a fork in the road and you're between jobs, or maybe you want to hear from God which way you're supposed to go or what you're supposed to do in your future, right? I would just encourage you, keep showing up day after day, keep doing the best at what you're doing, keep doing your best work, and to keep showing up and serve God in all the ways that He shows you, right? In all the ways that He provides, work and serve, and God will show you in His time. A passage that came to my mind was from Matthew 25, at the end of the world, when Jesus, so He splits the people up, right? After He's gathered all the nations, He splits those that disobeyed on the left and those that are saved on the right. And He says, "For I was hungry and you gave me food." This is what He tells them, right? He says, well, let me start in verse 34. He says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.'" And so to me, that's just an encouragement, right? Is there a homeless person that you keep seeing on your way to work, right? That you can probably stop and give them something? Is there a ministry at church you've been saying that you're going to serve at, but you just haven't made a priority and haven't sought out the information you need? Is there somebody sick that you know who you can call and check on, or take them some groceries, or maybe, they need a ride to the doctor? Just simple things like that, simple everyday things. Even just helping out at your house with chores, whatever it is, just doing the next right thing. Whoever's in front of us at the grocery store and needs help taking their groceries to their car, whatever it is, doing the next right thing that's right in front of us, and God will speak to us in His timing through sometimes the simplest way, sometimes when we least expect it. He'll provide us that answer. So I hope that was an encouragement to you. I hope that releases some of the anxiety and eases it of hearing God's voice and not know which path to take, and to just know, you know what, keep showing up where you are in life. Keep serving, or start to serve if you're not already. Start serving, and God will reveal His answer in His right time and when we're ready for it. So thank you guys for joining me again for this video, and I hope you guys have a blessed week. Bye.